There are so many examples of going into new sectors for a diversified business such as yours, and thinking about how you adapt to the new environment and then take that learning back to
and then spread it out across the group, and during that period, the 90s, when I took over, we also developed a whole new sector, again, related to laying out infrastructure for the country. This time it was in the telecommunications field. This was different. Our country was dominated by one major private company. They pretty much controlled the whole telecommunication industry. And again, under President Ramos's government, they decided to liberalize the sector and encourage investment to come in. So we had very little knowledge about the telecommunications sector at the time, if none. And it was not the telecommunications sector you see today. We had a small investment in a telex company. And so we had a little bit of but we had a minority stake. We weren't running the business. The old conglomerate IT&T used to have a significant stake there. And then one day, ITT came to us and said, look, we're thinking of selling out of the business globally, which is quite extraordinary if you think about it. That's IT&T that had a global footprint in telecommunications. They sold pretty much everything they had at the time when telecommunications took off. But that's a whole other story. It has nothing to do with us, but probably worthy of study. Anyway, they said to us, you need a good partner and sell out with us. Let's just sell out together. And I'd just taken over the helm at the time, early 90s. And I made a pitch with our board that this is an area that was going to grow and change, and technology was shifting, and that I'd like to take a major stake in the business, and recommended it. It was a tough process, number one, because when you're going through a liberalization, there are a lot of forces at play to try to prevent an industry from changing from a structure which had been there for 50, 60 years. But it was the political will of the government that created the right framework. Then we had to find a technical partner. We had very little knowledge about the area. And we were lucky after a number of tries to find ourselves with the Singapore Telecom Group, who've been incredible partners. I didn't want to tie up with a supplier or a company that made equipment. I wanted to tie up with a service operator. And when I looked around, I said in Asia, one of the leading figures in this space and one of the best standards being set in service operations were the Singapore group. So I packed my bags and headed to Singapore. Didn't know anyone at the time. Called up some bankers, said, introduce me to people. I'd like to meet the Temasek group and the Singapore group. And at the beginning, they were deeply concerned. They said, there is no framework for this industry. There is no policy framework. I said, I realize that, but there's an opportunity. He said, yeah, no, we understand there's an opportunity, but no, we're not ready for this. So it took a while, and there was a lot of discussion backwards and forwards, and we didn't really have a clear framework for investment. And the Singaporeans, by nature, are quite.
They like a framework.
They like clean frameworks, which of course Singapore has. But I said, this is an emerging market; it's evolving. Why don't we do this together? We'll work with the government, and we'll work on this. And after a while, it took them a while, and maybe that was another key lesson. We threw our hat in the ring together. We reached an agreement on how to invest in this company, but we had to do many things jointly. Number one, we had a telex company, not a telecom company, so we had to get a national franchise. We had to go to our Congress, our Senate. That took 2 or 3 years to process, and then once we had it, we then had to start evolving the technology. We had to decide what technology to use. The beginnings of mobile were happening. The US had a standard, the Europeans had a standard. I didn't know which way to go. We talked to the Singaporeans, and they said, at the time they said the U.S. standard from an engineering point of view is a very good standard, but the Europeans have really built a standard that that works very well across national boundaries, the GSM standard at the time. And they said, let's go with that.